In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So we're going to speak about a topic that's very important even for single people, which is decision making. And maybe we struggle even, before being in a relationship for decision making. There's a lot of factors that can be involved in how we make decisions. Some people maybe make decisions very, very logically, looking at all of the research and do a thorough job of studying a situation before making a decision. Other people maybe are more intuitive. Maybe they react to a gut feeling that they have instead of necessarily studying a situation as much. And different people have different ways of making decisions. But then, and I think what this workshop is intended to reflect is that when we have different ways of making decisions, especially important decisions, it can cause conflict because we look at situations differently. And so I wanted to speak a little bit about this topic of decision making now when it comes to marriage. So the first thing to understand is that marriage is a team effort, and maybe that seems obvious, but there are a lot of people actually that get married thinking that they are going to kind of continue their life the way that things have been before, without a lot of change, without a lot of change or sacrifice or adaptation in their own way of thinking about things. A lot of people, when they get married, they don't even realize how different other people are compared to them, and how much that is going to touch their lives and make a big impact on their own decision making and their own lifestyle. And so people go into marriage assuming that other people see the world the way that they see it, right? And so, and even during, like courtship and engagement, yes, obviously you are interacting with each other and you're getting a flavor of each other's personality and how it might be different from yourself. But the first big decision that you make as a couple is wedding planning. And wedding planning is where we see a lot of people start to, for the first time, start getting to arguments and fights about the details of, how much we can afford and where it should be and how it should go, and people have different opinions about it. So the first thing is marriage is a team effort. Whenever you are going to be married and you are making decisions together, it's going to be affecting the two of you. One fallacy that sometimes people also think is that it's possible to make a decision for yourself that's kind of separate and independent from the other person. But there are very few decisions, actually. Even a decision that's primarily focused on yourself is going to have some impact on your spouse, on your kids, the rest of your family, because it's going to take time from you. So, like, let's say, and we'll get to this point, but let's say, one of the, you decide that you want to start being more regular in exercise, right? So you begin working out, right? And you have a regimen and you want to go 2-3 times a week to go exercise and so on. And so obviously this is affecting you and it's good for you. It's something good. But the fact that you've done that now means that you have less time for other things, less time with your spouse. Maybe it's going to cause your spouse to have to change their schedule in some way, or to take up some responsibility that you used to have to take. Let's say, you used to be, more involved in making dinner. Now your spouse, on those days where you're going to be gone, now has to do that. I'm not speaking about whether this is good or bad. It's just the idea that a decision that you feel is primarily about you, it actually has a deeper impact on other people. And so in Amos, it says, this famous verse, it says, "Can two walk together unless they are agreed?" Right? Meaning, can two people be in harmony with one another, walking together without conflict, on the same page, unless they are agreed? And this is a big point, right? And again, maybe we see that we have differences, and it's okay to have differences. But what's important is how do we resolve our differences? How do we manage our differences? How do we see things from the perspective of the other person? Usually when you're faced with a person who sees the world differently than you, there's different ways you can react. We see this in politics all the time. Whenever a person, you meet someone who's politically different than you, one of the immediate reactions that a person might have is, okay, well, that person is evil. Like, they have evil intent. Because you don't see the world the way that I see it, because you want to do things differently than I think it should be done, the reason is you have evil intent, right? There's some wickedness behind it, some depravity, some selfishness, something bad about you, right? Another reaction that we might have when someone has a different viewpoint than us is we think, well, you're crazy, like, or you're ignorant, right? You're not seeing things right. Like you're blind. Like I see things correctly and you see things incorrectly, right? It's very natural for us to jump to these conclusions. So the bottom line, though, is however it is we are, we see each other, or the way we react to one another, we cannot walk together in peace and harmony unless we are agreed. And agreed means, it doesn't mean that maybe would have been the first natural instinct that I had of whatever decisions that we're making, but we are agreed on a course of action, right? Maybe there's compromise involved. Maybe sometimes we'll do things the way I think they should be done. Other times we'll do things the way you think they should be done. Maybe we'll defer to one another in different areas depending on our strengths and our weaknesses. But in whatever way, we should feel at the end comfortable with whatever decisions are being taken. However it is we came up to those decisions. Disagreements shouldn't feel like a battle, right? One of the reasons people avoid disagreements and avoid confrontation is because they become so acrimonious, like become so sharp and fierce and bring fights and maybe insults and just a bad time. It's bad, it's painful, it's difficult, it's all these negative emotions whenever we have disagreements. And so some people will just rather stay quiet. They will avoid any confrontation. Okay, just I'll leave you, do whatever it is you want to do, because I don't want to get involved in the process of trying to communicate and figuring out what is the best option for us moving forward. Because every time we try to do this, it results in a fight. It results in something that doesn't have a good outcome. We don't want to be there, right? Obviously, like we want to be able to have disagreements because we need to be honest, right? We want to be able to voice our opinions about how things should be, but then be able to resolve it, right, in peace, right? And that's a big part of this team effort in marriage and decision making. Think like teammates solving a problem together, right? We see that there is a problem that has to be solved, and we both take responsibility for this problem. We take responsibility for solving it. We take responsibility for researching, for understanding, for being informed. We take responsibility for communicating with one another, right? Because we consider that every decision that we make is actually a decision that is shared between the two of us. Also, we should be asking what's best for both of us and not just what's best for the one, right? It's a team effort. Maybe I find something that I'm very, very interested in doing, right? I'm very interested in, in a certain hobby that I have, and I want to spend a lot of money on that hobby. And maybe this is a hobby that I've had even from before marriage. And unless I'm careful, right, I might be in a situation where if I marry a person who doesn't share that hobby, or doesn't think that hobby is worthwhile, right, and maybe thinks that hobby is too expensive, then now here I am in a position where I'm saying, no, we need to keep spending money on this, and the other person is in disagreement, right? What is best for both, and how do we find compromise for both? We should seek mutual peace and not personal victory, right? Again, the idea here is to find a balance and a compromise between the two people and not just feel like I, in the end, got what I wanted. And we'll talk about this later, because sometimes when a person gets what they want, they think that they've won. They think that they're happy with the outcome, but this can build some hidden resentment over time, especially when it's something that is kind of something very repetitive. It can build hidden resentment in the other person, and again, we don't want to get to that point. This is also very prevalent in dealing with finances. That's why we always recommend having one joint account where all of your money goes into that account that you're sharing together, rather than each person feeling like I have my separate money and I decide what I do with this money, and you decide what you do with your money, and then everyone has like a separate decision-making process. No, actually, all our resources are shared, and we should be making decisions together. It's a team effort. Okay. In Ephesians chapter 5, St. Paul says, actually, we should be prioritizing the needs of the other, right? Because we're not in a marriage, we are not just an organization that is trying to be equitable or fair. We are in a relationship which is Christ-like. Right? That's why when Christ speaks about the relationship between the husband and the wife, he says the husband should be loving his wife the way that Christ loves the church and putting her needs above his own, right? And if the wife does the same, also wanting to put the needs of her husband above her own, then the needs of both people will be met while there is harmony and peace and love that is felt between the two people. I'll always feel that my spouse is interested in what is best for me, always putting me above her, and vice versa. This is love, right? The flip side of it is if everybody just does selfishly what is best for them, right? If everyone does selfishly what is best for them, maybe yes, still my needs would be met because I am kind of pursuing my own needs, but there's no love, right? Love is to say, instead of you meeting your own needs and I meeting my own, which is what life was like as a single person before we got married, marriage is now you rely on the other person to meet your needs, and you are the ones meeting the needs of your spouse. And this builds love between the two people. In Ephesians 5, it says, so husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. No one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. This emphasis on the idea of the unity between the husband and the wife, and if you hate your spouse, it's like you are hating yourself. If you abuse your spouse, you are abusing yourself. If you mistreat your spouse, you are mistreating yourself, because you have become one. And anything that happens to one affects the other, okay? And so we should prioritize the needs of the other. And people who go into marriage believing that marriage is all about my needs being met, the way that I am made to feel by my spouse, the expectations that I have of my spouse of how they would treat me, are going to be disappointed, right? Marriage is a decision that I'm making, and the commitment that I'm making of how I will choose to act relative to my spouse, how I will choose to act toward them. It's a decision. And that decision is not based on my feelings. It's not based on how I feel in any particular day. It's not based on whether I think my spouse is fulfilling their end of this agreement or not, right? Again, because it is the love of Christ, which was unconditional. So he's saying, I will always prioritize my spouse. Even when I'm upset, even when I'm angry, even when I'm tired, even when I feel like my needs have not been met, I will always prioritize the needs of my spouse. This brings unity and love in the relationship and helps break any negative cycles. So if there is a cycle of selfishness that's beginning to develop in the relationship, when you make a proactive act of love toward them, it breaks it, right? Because if I say, well, I'm only going to do something good for my spouse if she does something good for me first, and she's thinking the same way, then no one's ever going to do anything good for anyone. Okay, so instead you have to come out of that cycle and say, I will do what is good for my spouse regardless of how that person is treating me. So caring about your spouse's well-being as your own. And love means taking their needs seriously. And this is, maybe we've all heard about the book, The 5 Love Languages, that speaks about how each person has a different way of feeling loved by other people. A big part of this, and a problem that can arise in decision-making and in the relationship as a whole, is each person has different needs. Each person has a different way of feeling loved. And if I can't understand my spouse, if I can't understand the things that they appreciate, right, then it will be difficult for me to give them what they need, right? So if you have, for instance, a woman who cares very much about order in the house. She cares very much about the dishes being clean, about the house being clean. She cares very much about these things. Whereas the man, he doesn't care. For him, it doesn't make any difference to him whether the house is clean or not. He's very comfortable and happy in whatever state the house is in, and maybe he thinks, it's a waste of time for us to spend so much time cleaning the house all the time. Let's say this is just a hypothetical situation, but of course it's not as hypothetical as we would like to hear. So, it's more real than it happens a lot. So if you have a situation like this, okay, for the husband's perspective, it's like, I don't understand why if I go and I do the dishes, I don't understand why if I vacuum the floor, I don't understand why this makes her happy. Like, it doesn't make me happy. Like, when I see her doing it, I'm like, yeah, it's good. I mean, I'm glad that you're doing that, but it's not like a huge thing for me, right? Because I'm fine with I don't even realize the house is not clean. The house seems fine, but she's going around cleaning the house, right? So you have to understand things from the perspective of the other. What are the things that makes them happy, right? Rather than what are the things that you yourself would want. And make sacrifices out of love and not obligation. Don't do it to not be, to not get into trouble. Do it because you want to show love proactively to your spouse. And so when we're making decisions, I should ask myself the question, how is this decision going to affect my spouse? And how can I ensure that it has the best possible outcome for them, right? So this is an important tenet and foundation of decision making. As I said, most decisions affect both spouses. In Philippians 2:4, it says, let each one of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. Even small choices can affect the spouse. Like as I mentioned, the example of maybe of working out or studying, for a degree, or things that I feel are very much about me, but they have a big impact on my spouse as well. Check if a solo decision has a shared impact. Have a conversation with your spouse when you're getting ready to make a decision. Make sure you and your spouse are always on the same page in every decision that you make. Don't just make decisions alone. Now, over time, and as people are married for longer periods of time, they'll begin to get a sense of, I know how my spouse would consider this decision, whether they would be okay with it or not. I don't necessarily have to go back to ask them about every small little thing, because you already have a sense. Maybe this comes up with budgeting, right? At the beginning of a relationship, I always recommend to people, make sure you're on the same page for almost everything that you buy, right? Especially if your money is tight, you want to make sure that, okay, how much money I'm going to spend on this, right? Again, it can happen. Like, different people can have different tolerance levels of how much should be spent on different things. A woman might want to spend money on makeup, on purses, on things like that. Maybe the man doesn't agree to spend that much money on, even though that's what she was spending before when she was single. And maybe the woman doesn't want her husband to spend money on his hobbies and electronics and other things that he likes, right? So even though maybe that's what he was doing before. So now that you are together, all those decisions that you used to be making separately and individually for yourself are now joint decisions. Right? And you have to make sure that the other person's okay with it. Now, over time, as you're married for years, you begin to get a sense of what the other person would be okay with, right? Maybe and maybe also money is less tight, and I'll go buy something that I want. I don't necessarily have to go and ask my spouse every single time, because I got a sense of what would be considered reasonable for them and not. But definitely we have to be mindful that every decision I make, every dollar I spend, is really a joint resource and something that we have to decide together, and involve your partner when the outcome touches both, right? So we're getting each other's opinion, involving the other person. The fourth point is give big decisions time. In Proverbs 18:15, it says, the heart of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Big decisions need time. Don't try to make big decisions quickly, and don't assume that you have all the information that you need to make a decision from the first time you think about it. No, like, let the thoughts percolate. Like, think about it, get other people's opinions, wait, pray on it, make sure you understand all the facets of it, talk to other people about it, right? And both people can be doing this. And that's one of the nice things about having two people involved in the decision making, is they both can go do research and understand and get information separately, and they come back and they share it with each other, right? Have several talks about it, and confirm that, what is it that you want to do, instead of rushing a choice. Another principle here is, if your spouse begins to say something contrary to what you like or what you want, don't be quick to try to silence them or to tell them that they're wrong, but just listen, right? Listen about what is it that they are saying. Maybe they have a perspective that you don't have. Maybe they've learned something that you haven't learned. Listen and hear them out. And you don't have to necessarily make a decision at that point. You can wait. Can revisit it again another time. See, has the decision changed? Has the opinions of both people changed? But definitely don't rush into a decision. Also, revisit it often as the emotions and the thoughts evolve, right? So even if I make a decision, right, and now we made the decision, let's check in with each other. So was it a good decision? Is it something that we want to adjust or change as a result of our experience now that we've made this decision, if it's possible to change? Or are we happy with it? Are we happy with the way that it is? What you definitely don't want to do is to blame your spouse for a decision, right? Because in the end, it's your responsibility, along with them, to make decisions together. If your spouse made a decision that you disagreed with, and you didn't speak up, and you didn't try to be more involved and to give your input and come to a compromise at the beginning, then you can't now blame your spouse and say, well, this is your fault. You're the one who decided to do this. There shouldn't be a decision that's made only by one person, right? So we are deciding, right? If you chose to stay quiet, if you chose not to speak up, whatever it is, then you are just as responsible for the fact that you said nothing, right? And you saw something happening that you felt was not the right approach, right? You need to take your responsibility as well and speak up, but give big decisions the time that they need. Also, share both thoughts and feelings. And this is something that's difficult, maybe for men and women to understand from each other. Men tend to be very logical, and they want to uh, look at all the facts and make decisions based on the facts. Okay? Women, maybe they are more emotional, intuitive in the way they make their decisions, and they have a certain feeling toward one outcome versus the other that they can't necessarily point to a specific thing. There was one example where a person was looking to buy a computer, and there was one computer that was cheaper and better than another one. But that computer that was cheaper and better than the other one was also not very attractive looking. It was very plain looking. Okay, and this was a computer for a woman. And so her husband said, we have a computer that's better and it's cheaper. Why don't you get that one? And she said, no, but I don't like the way that it looks. It's like, but your computer is not about how it looks like, it's about how it performs. But in the end, she insisted, right? She said, no, I don't like it. So he said, okay, get the one that you want, even though it wasn't as good. Maybe from a man's perspective, looking at that doesn't make sense, right? Like, it's like, it doesn't make sense. It seems like an inefficient use of resources for us to make such a decision. Because again, a lot of men think this way, right? Whereas maybe more women think of, no, I want to have an emotional experience associated with the thing that I'm going to purchase. I want to feel comfortable with it. I want to feel happy with it. And my feelings about it are not just based on the technical specifications of it. They're based on something else, right? So sometimes it's difficult for men and women to understand these differences, right? Between each other. And that's why it's important to listen to both, right? It's important to listen to both. And specifically for men, to listen to the emotions about that women specifically. And of course, men also have emotions, but it's just more often than not, it tends to be in this way. But we all have feelings, and sometimes those feelings are not necessarily rational. They're not essentially like related to the facts. But I just have a feeling toward this. So we have to communicate and be careful of that. In Romans 12, it says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep, meaning share in the emotions of other people. So share how you feel, not just what you think. Feelings give context to your reasoning. So like to give understanding, why do I think this way, right? How am I thinking? What is my thought process? And combine logic with emotion for a deeper connection. As I said before, watch for hidden resentment. Resentment is often silent, but its effects are loud, meaning oftentimes a decision is made that one of the two people is not very convinced with, and instead of feeling like, you know what, I've compromised and I've allowed my spouse to take this choice that maybe I'm not 100% convinced with, but I'm doing it kind of without any coercion. I feel I'm fine with it, like I'm doing it for their sake, I'm doing it out of love, I do it because I care about them and that's what they really want. Instead of giving of myself in this way, sometimes I feel like something is being stolen from me. Like I really, really don't want this, and I'm being forced to do something that I don't want to do. And if this is something that happens regularly or happens a lot, especially in a specific subject, right, then over time it might build resentment, right? It might build resentment. And this unspoken frustration builds over time and can have other negative effects on the relationship that are not even directly obvious. Like, if you've ever sometimes seen your spouse get upset about something just suddenly without any real reason, why did you suddenly get upset about this thing? There's usually another reason underneath, like hidden reason, that they're upset about something else, which is then kind of affecting everything in our relationship. Avoid pressure-based choices that cause hurt later, right? Like if you feel like your spouse is not on board with the decision, then keep talking about it. Don't just move forward and make the decision until you're both on the same page. Again, it doesn't mean that each person's going to be 100% in an agreement about what should be done, but at least we're in agreement with a course of action that we're going to try. Okay, we agree that we're going to try this way. If this doesn't work, then maybe we'll try a different way. But I'm not being forced to make a decision that I'm not comfortable with doing. Like, for instance, if let's say the wife is wanting to host her parents at the house often, like almost every weekend. And maybe at the beginning, the husband is in agreement with this. He's like, okay, they can come, they can come. But after a while, if it's happening very, very often, almost every week, then it becomes something difficult to stomach, right? And they start to develop a kind of resentment. And maybe they're worried and afraid, and they're saying, well, if I say something, then maybe she was going to be offended. But no, actually, this is a time where we have to communicate effectively and well together. We can't just stay quiet and accept something is happening that is contrary to what we really want, because in the end, it's going to just blow up later, right? It's better to communicate at the beginning and find that balance and compromise before it gets to that point. The seventh point is to embrace biblical roles with love. In Ephesians 5, again, when St. Paul is speaking about the relationship between husbands and wives, he says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church. So what God speaks about, what the Scripture speaks about, is there is a relationship in the marriage, right? There is a relationship in the marriage, and these roles, these biblical roles that we have, are not intended to be oppressive, right, or coercive. They are intended to promote love and harmony, okay? And so the man is called to be the leader, okay? The man is called to be the leader. The leader doesn't mean, because he is the leader, it doesn't mean that he doesn't see what is best interest of his wife, because actually that's what we just said before, is you look out for what's the best interest of your spouse. So he's looking for what is the best interest of his wife. But in the end, he is the one leading, right? So she is communicating with him, he is seeking her advice, and in the end, they should be in agreement if possible. But what happens if they are not in agreement? There has to be some decision made in the end, right? This is reserved for the husband. Submission is strength. Like submission is actually the characteristic of Christ himself. Like, for the sake of love, when he submitted to all those who were, violent toward him, for the sake of love and for the sake of the salvation of the people, right? So submission is not, like, when we speak about like submission of the wife to her husband, this is not to say that she has no opinion. This is not to say that in the end nothing is going to work the way that she wants it to be. No, but it means that she's going to be willing to yield, and actually he should also be willing to yield. Honor each other's roles with respect and trust. This idea of the biblical principles, rather than each person just wanting control all the time and just vying for who's going to be right and who's going to be the one to make the decision in the end, that's just going to cause conflict and a sense of aggression, where each person is just it's a power struggle. We don't want the marriage to become a power struggle. We don't want like one person to feel like they have to fight in order to get their rights or to get what they think is right. It should be based on love and compromise and harmony. This is very important. Also, validate one another. And this can be difficult, because some people feel that validating another person's opinion is the same thing as agreeing with it, okay? But it's not. Validating another person's opinion means that you listen and then you acknowledge that it's a valid point. You acknowledge that you understand why they're thinking this way. Like I said, instead of thinking that a person we disagree with is either wicked or insane or ignorant, right? Instead of say, no, I don't think you are wicked, insane, or ignorant. I understand why you think that such and such should be done, but I have a different perspective. I have a different viewpoint of how we should move forward in this decision. And this requires, instead of us just kind of primarily being focused on wanting to convince, because that's what we tend to do, is we just want to convince the other person of our view, right? Let me tell you all the reasons why such and such is happening. And maybe while the other person is talking, instead of really listening to what they're saying, all we're thinking in our mind is, how am I going to rebut this? How am I going to respond to this? This is what I'm going to say. And we're not really paying attention to what they're saying. So the first step in trying to convince someone of our perspective is to first validate, right? We listen to what they are saying. We validate what they are saying. It's like, I understand why you think that we should purchase this. I understand why you think that we should go to this place. I understand why you think that we should move into this house or move into this city, and list all the positives, right? But I also think that there are negatives to this, and my perspective is such and such. When your spouse feels like they are heard and validated, then they are much more likely to agree with you eventually, rather than if they feel like you are just being defensive and just trying to convince them and haven't really paid attention or listened to them. Acknowledgement goes a long way in bringing harmony and bringing that even if they don't completely agree with your decision, then maybe they will accept it moving forward because they feel like they've been heard. Validation shows love even without agreement, right? And so this is also important. There's a difference between validation and agreement. I can validate people that I disagree with. It's a kind of respect. It shows them that I'm listening, I'm paying attention, that they have valid points, even though I might disagree with those points. Unity in decision making matters more than winning. In Romans 12, it says, if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. So here we get to the point, it's like, well, what if my partner is just absolutely intransigent? They're not willing to compromise. They're not willing to change their opinion at all. And I'm in a situation where, the whole relationship has become toxic as a result of this point, okay? What do we do then? So again, the focus should be on unity rather than on winning, right? If I'm in a situation where, unless it's a moral issue or something that it's just an absolutely devastating thing, disagreement of like based on the consequences of what might happen, I should be willing to yield. Say, okay, you feel very strongly about this. You are not willing to compromise on it at this, okay, I'm going to let it go. Okay, maybe there'll be something else where you're going to let it go for me. But I'm going to let it go because the peace and the relationship is more important than on quote unquote being right. Of course, being right is being right in your own opinion, right? My opinion is such and such, but I'm willing to let that go for the sake of the peace of the relationship, and it should go both ways. There'll be other times where the person will be willing to let go. Let go of the small things for the sake of the love and the peace in the relationship. It's something very important. So when we're making decisions, we don't always focus on I want to be the one. Sometimes we need to help the other person or to defer to the other person in a certain area. Another thing here is that there are certain areas where we both have maybe different strengths. So for instance, I have a strength when it comes to a certain field. Like someone who's very good at, let's say, being a handyman, right, in the house. Okay, so maybe the man who's very good at these kinds of things, he is going to, she's going to defer to him when it comes to anything related to fixing the house, right? Even if she doesn't understand or she doesn't completely agree, but because she trusts him, he's an expert in that area, she's going to trust him. And similarly, he's going to trust her in certain areas where she is an expert in. So not everything we are 50-50 in the sense that we're not both equally experts in everything. I can defer, and actually this is builds trust. So friends, if I trust my spouse, that means I can trust them to make a decision that's primarily their decision, because I trust that whatever decision they make is going to be the right one. It's going to be the best one. And then at that point, I don't have to get very involved in the details and to try to, control the decision or adjust the decision, because it's trust. And you'll find that if especially maybe from the side of the man, if the man feels like his wife does not trust him for the things that he has demonstrated success in and that he is good at, it will build resentment in him. Like the man wants to feel like, you trust me. Trust me to take us to where we need to go. Trust me that I'm going to take care of something that's broken in the house. Trust me, whatever, right? If he feels it's an area where it's his sphere of influence and responsibility to take care of it, just trust me. Trust me in it. Similarly, if it's something that's, let's say your wife is a lawyer and you have a question about the law, right? You're not going to go and try to tell her how to do it or what's right and what's wrong. You're going to trust her. You're going to say, whatever decision you make, I trust that you're going to make the right decision, right? So again, this is brings unity and trust in the relationship, because we're not trying to second guess the decisions of our spouse when we definitely can recognize that they know better than we do. The last point is let love lead every decision, meaning let everything be done, as St. Paul said, let all that you do be done with love. Ask yourself whenever you're making any decision, is this based on love? Is it based on selfishness? Is it based on my desire to be right? Is it based on me wanting to prove to my spouse that I'm competent? Is there some motivation that I have beyond just let me put the needs of the other person before me? If we all put the needs of our spouses before us, there would be harmony in every relationship. But because we don't, and because we prioritize and value things that are less important, like trying to prove that we are right, it causes conflict. It causes us to, instead of be focusing on what is based on love, but instead what is based on selfishness, which is just based on what I want to show and what I want to do. And sometimes love means sacrifice, meaning sometimes it means I am not going to get what I want. I'm going to defer this decision to someone else, or I'm going to do what's best for them instead of what's best for me. Decide with compassion and not just reason. Like, what is going to bring, like, what is going to make that person feel cared for? What is going to make that person feel loved? What's going to make that person feel like they are taken care of and that I love them? That is the feeling we are trying to instill in our spouses. And I guarantee you that if you are doing this consistently, your relationship will improve and your spouse will do the same thing to you. And I go back to what I said before. Don't be reactive in your relationship. Be proactive. Be the one to initiate this. Be the one to initiate acts of love rather than to react to your spouse's acts of love. If you are just waiting and reacting, then it will never happen. It will only happen when you are proactive, when you initiate these acts of love. So in summary, there's 10 points we covered. The first is marriage is a team effort. All the decisions that we make affect one another. Even the decisions that I think are personal to me are actually affecting my spouse as well. Second, prioritize your spouse's needs. Think what is best for them. Think, oh, they're going to come home from work tired, so I'm going to do something to make their time easier. Think what is going to make them happy, right? Rather than thinking about only what makes you happy. Third is most decisions affect both spouses, as we said. 4, give big decisions time, meaning don't make quick decisions. If it's a big decision that's important, that a lot is resting on it, talk about it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, take weeks, take months. Start early because there is an important decision coming up, and don't assume that there's going to be one quick answer. Maybe this is another problem that we fall into, is we just assume that our spouse is going to agree with our great decision that we want to make, but the reality is maybe not. Maybe they don't see it as a great decision, and it's going to take time to flesh this out and to work it out. So start early so you're not pressured to make a decision. Share both thoughts and feelings, meaning both thoughts and feelings are valid, right? If a person says, I just don't feel comfortable, it's like, well, why don't you feel comfortable? I just don't feel comfortable. Okay, you don't feel comfortable. That's valid. It's valid to say I don't feel comfortable, because if we go ahead and move forward with it and your spouse is not comfortable, then eventually they're going to want to undo the decision. They're going to have second thoughts. They're not going to want to move forward. They're not going to be happy, even if there isn't a clear reason why they're not comfortable. So obviously, if someone's not comfortable, try to make them comfortable if you need to answer some question that they have. But if there isn't a good reason why that you are not comfortable, then it's okay. Like it's still valid. Watch for hidden resentment, meaning if you're always getting your way, if your spouse is always deferring to you, ask yourself the question, are they happy or are they resenting me because they're always sacrificing for me? Am I sacrificing for them in return, right? Make them feel like it's not just a one-way relationship. Embrace biblical roles with love. So everyone, make sure you understand the role, the husband as the leader and the wife as the helper, right? Again, it doesn't mean that the wife is not competent, or that he doesn't get her opinion, or that he's just going to choose whatever it is that he is going to do. But this is the way that God intended the relationship to be, so that there is balance and there is harmony in the relationship, so that it's not two people that are trying to fight to be the leader. It's two people trying to fight to get their way in every decision. Number 8, validate one another, even when you disagree, right? Even when you disagree, still, make sure you are listening and understand the stance of your spouse. Tell them that you understand and that why you think that their points make sense, but you still don't agree with them. 9, unity matters more than winning. It's not just about who's right. It's not just about who gets their way in the end. We care about the unity of the relationship. And then finally, let love lead every decision. Everything should be done in love, and because that's the core of our relationship. It's a relationship of love, again, just like Christ demonstrated his love for us. Does anyone have any questions or comments about anything we've said? Is there this?
ask, where do boundaries fall in all of this? As far as it makes sense to give it love the other person more than you love yourself, but where do boundaries, like you said, the exercise example, and yes, it's taking time away from the spouse, but at what point do you say, okay, but I still have to take care of this or do this for whatever health, mental health, whatever it may be, to be able to take care of the other person?
So I mean, there isn't one right answer, right? Because every situation is different. So you have to look at um, what are all of the responsibilities that we have, and what is the time that we have, and does it make sense to sacrifice some of that time for the sake of the needs of an individual person, that is, let's say, for their well-being, like exercise? Can we adapt our schedule without so much disruption that it becomes unmanageable? And some people might decide yes, some people might decide no. Some people might come up with some creative solution, some people might not. Some people might have other resources they could rely on, and other people might not. Like, so for instance, let's say, you know, some couples who have young children have parents that live not far away that can come and help with, let's say, the kids, to give the parents time to do something on their own. Other couples don't have parents that live close by to do that. So the details of what makes sense is very specific to the couple and their situation. But definitely, when, you know, like if I come and I say, I'm really struggling with my health, I really want to have time to exercise on a regular basis, how can we make this happen? And then try to brainstorm and see what makes sense. Maybe my desire of wanting to exercise 3 times a week for an hour at a time outside of the house, maybe that's not practical, but maybe I could do it twice a week for 30 minutes, or maybe we could sometime find something. Like, the idea is that whenever your spouse presents something, is that you validate it, you give it a priority, and you sincerely try to find a solution for it as much as possible, instead of just dismissing it, right? Because the other option would be, oh, no, we just don't have time for that. And maybe you would have to take more responsibility on yourself. Like, okay, because my spouse is going to be out of the house now for a certain time, now I have to do a little bit more, right? And maybe I have to push myself to do a little bit more. But again, if I personally feel like I'm unable to do it, right, because I'm already overwhelmed and overburdened, it's too much for me, then again, I communicate that and say, you know what, I would love to help you with this, but I feel that I can't. What other kind of solution maybe can we find? So it's a conversation. A big part of it has to do with your spouse understanding that you value what their desire is. Like, I value the fact that you want to go exercise. I'm sincerely trying to find a solution for it. But in the end, if my conclusion is I just don't know what to do, or I don't have it in me to give, then they also have to honor that, right? And again, trying to find other creative solutions. But I don't want to give like a certain answer, right? Because everybody has different needs, and everybody's situations is different. If then you said, oh, well, this person, because they were diagnosed with something and the doctor said you must exercise, 3 times a week, or else you're at risk for heart attack or something. Okay, now it's elevated that from just being, maybe just a desire that I have to something that's necessary for my health. And now maybe I have to sacrifice more in order to achieve that. So it's very dynamic and depending on the situation. Right? Yeah.